So beautiful panel. Who would like to begin?
Hi, my name is Joe. I'm a Berlin-based coach and trainer for groups in the field of consciousness mainly, and connected to that, the emotional work that is necessary to enter into higher states of consciousness. And yeah, so many messages. I'd like to share the one from my 5-year-old self. That's the little guy that just loves life and loves to be in connection with everybody, and to liberate that in my clients or my students. That's my passion. So, thank you.
Yes? Hi. I'm Stefana Bosse, and I co-direct an organization called the Psychedelic Society, and my main involvement there is leading retreats in the Netherlands where we support people going on psychedelic journeys with psilocybin truffles. So I have a big passion for psychedelics and their potential in so many things, like helping us come back to ourselves, to our power, in healing trauma and pain, many big range. But equally, I have been training in holistic counseling, and I'm very passionate about the combination of the two approaches. So at the same time as really being a voice that's very pro-psychedelic, and with this movement where there's a lot of positive research coming out, also holding that space that they are not a be-all, end-all, fix-everything panacea, but you still need all these other amazing tools that we are exploring to support that. So it's a very powerful tool in a toolbox of many other powerful tools.
Hey everyone, I'm Raffaello Manacorda. So many things I would like to share with you, and I'll have an opportunity this afternoon to share more. But for now, what seems relevant is that I was trained in different styles of yoga and tantra and sacred sexuality for a bunch of years. Nowadays, I am part of this organism that you've already heard about from Araminta and others, the International School of Temple Arts. And one of the things I have done with them that is really relevant to our discussion today is that I co-created a training that is called the practitioner training, where we support men and women who want to be agents of transformation for others, as coaches, as therapists, as healers. There is a lot to say about this term, but in such a way that it doesn't exclude sexuality and the body, but it actually integrates it within the transformational work.
Hi, my name is Lance Hauge. I'm from Minnesota, and I do a combination of, I started out doing body work, and then primarily to fix my body so that I could go on my way and be done with the healing stuff. But trying to fix my body turned into emotional work and mental work, and eventually subtle energy work, and then I had a Kundalini experience that altered everything for me, and so I started incorporating that into the work I do, and I continue to just incorporate basically what I go through, and then what I, whether it's either downloads or study that I do, and I guess one of the things I'm most passionate about is integrating these methods and really trying to get the idea out there that they're not really different methods or different parts of life. They're all a part of life, and they're all interconnected, and bringing conscious presence to each of these levels is really the ultimate technique that I think, whether it's yoga or shamanic work or meditation or whatever, the understanding that it's all really bringing conscious attention and being present with and accepting and allowing is something that has become more and more obvious to me, and I'm passionate about doing that in my work.
I'm still Araminta, I think. Yeah, I'm mostly focused on supporting us all to recognize our innate human technology and to have full access to our creative potential and in ways that are heart-centered.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're exploring these different kind of elements of healing through the lens of how do we remove resistance to living our own purpose. And so I'd like to gather you in pods of 4, and you'll each have 1 minute to just drop into this question, this inquiry around healing and trauma and removing the resistance to purpose. And then there'll be a synthesizer to share and harvest any of the deeper inquiries or discussion points that will then converse with our panel. And we'll do the same up here. So gather in your groups of 4, please, and we will ring the bell. So listen for the bell and make sure all 4 of you are able to drop in together. And we'll just give a few seconds to form your group of 4, and then we'll ring the bell for the first time. Okay, begin. Person with the longest hair, if you haven't found someone to start. wrapping up and coming back. Okay, coming on back. So I'm happy to report that our panel has a vast array of topics that are alive for them. There's just so much diversity in this conversation, and we'd like to hear kind of what's alive. So, all right, Andrew's already up with a question. Do we have our microphone sharer? Okay, Andrew in the back.
We had a couple of things. I maybe let you speak for yours, the point that you just made, which I think was really important. But I'm very cautious around framing this as resistance to purpose. And I find that, and this has been true in my life, the things that I've been most wounded in and that are most frustrating to me are often the casing, they're the seed casing of something that can blossom, but it actually needs that protection and it needs that resistance. And as you were saying today, Terry, like we have this huge, massive weight that we need to lift together, but to become what it is that's possible for us to become, we need to push off against that in a way. We need that to test us and to challenge us. And so that way of thinking of the difficulties in our lives, which are very real, and the wounding that we feel, which is very painful, as being resistance to something else that we want or that we're reaching for, I think dualizes it in a way that can be problematic. And then you had something to say that was similar to that, which I thought was...
You go ahead. I'm generally afraid of people.
Okay, yeah. Me too. So Aftab was then saying, like, one of the things that feels like it's missing is this quality of you were calling it passion, I might call it fascination, just the compulsion to return to something over and over and over again, which is here already. It's not something we have to go and find. It's in your life somewhere. Like, what is it that you spend your time doing? What is it that you give your time and your energy and your love for that's already in you and it's moving through you? I don't know if I'm representing what it is. That's good, yeah. So I think we started kind of circling around that. So
Thank you for dropping that in. Does anybody feel anything they'd like to share regarding that?
Yeah, okay, I can share a few things on thoughts on the first point. And there too, one, I agree, I think there's something very important also in that resistance, and I think that I really believe in the innate intelligence of our personality structure, and that you cannot push someone to do something they are not ready for, and that there's a wisdom in also the defenses and the resistances that we've built up. So maybe many of you have had that experience of you've discovered something really amazing for yourself and you're like, oh, you got to try this, you got to do this. But if the door is not open from that person, that's not gonna work. So everyone has their own kind of pace and rhythm. And at the same time, I find that at that edge of really reaching the limit is where we really grow and where we learn the most, and that there's so much value in being pushed to that edge where you can also then find your strength and transcend your limits and transcend your resistance, and a whole new world opens up. So those are just some two thoughts I had on that.
I want to say something very brief to that too. And it's unfortunate that I think in most countries now the resistance bulbs are getting they're not sold anymore because they're such a beautiful metaphor of personal transformation. You have current, which is life force, and you have resistance, and that creates light. But of course, if the resistance is too big for the current, then the heat can damage the conductor, and then, you know, it's not working anymore. If there is no resistance, though, there is no light and no heat. So what's the balance? And that balance is what we are all working with, I believe. Balance between intensity of current and resistance, so that there can be light and heat, but no damage to the wire.
Okay, let's continue. Yes, right there. We're coming for you.
Hey. I don't know, a few things just came up to me in this trialogue, in relation to resistance and how we interpret that resistance. I also don't particularly like people, so I'm just kind of breathing through my nerves right now. So I think that something in relation to purpose that I found that is perhaps a resistance or a complication is that I very much can approach problems from the mind, and that some of the work that I've been doing is to try and do more body work, or to presence the idea of purpose within me through meditation, etc., and to see where it arises as something that resonates within my body as opposed to within my mind. And that I think perhaps there's a question regarding whether that resistance is sometimes an intelligent resistance to guide us away from a construct of our mind, because perhaps 8 years ago I might have had the idea very much of the mind in relation to the structures that I'm controlled by, whether that's a friendship circle, a business circle, or the structures of my society, that to make particular steps towards a particular thing is my purpose. And that because of the fact that I've not done sufficient inner work, I hadn't appreciated that actually I just asserted something of the mind that really is just a product of the structures that are controlling us already. And subsequently, the resistance to me attempting to achieve that purpose, whether that's the internal friction of something like a breakdown, or whether that's just the feedback that I'm getting on as I'm carrying that purpose with me moment by moment, that's actually information that I can kind of meditate on or feel or whatever, see where it sits with me, that resistance actually might be guiding me towards what my purpose actually is, rather than seeing that resistance as something to be necessarily overcome, if we're using the metaphor of it being a roadblock, for example, on something that we are sure is our purpose, because I think that uncertainty is also part of purpose.
Can I?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, please.
Yeah, to me it resembles the answer that Raffaello just gave, and I like the metaphor of dance. When you dance with a partner, it's this connection that you have in touch, where you lead your partner, and if your partner doesn't give you resistance, then there's no dance. Yeah, so when you share what you just shared, you have a dance at you have a different dance every time, in every phase of your life. So yes, the resistance, you can embrace the resistance in that time and stretch it as far as you want to go, and just listen to when it becomes too much or when it guides you onto a different path. So yeah, it's very beautiful to be where you are with the resistance, and then dance off of that. Thanks.
I'd be bit more wild, I think, in the sense of the part of us that wants the comfortable pace and wants not to hit any trauma and not to have any breakdowns and not to have our life fall apart. That part deserves space and deserves to be listened to and has wisdom. And at the same time, a lot of that is our personality egoic structure, and it has a role in the entire organism. But on some level, it is at odds with transformation, in my experience. Like, there's a part of us that continually dies, and there's a part that will continually freak out about that death and not want to die. And compassion and being able to be present and lovingly hold all those pieces even while they're freaking out. So it's like we listen to all the pieces, but we don't take all of them 100% seriously, is a little bit of the dance that I do, at least in my journey. Because there's a gift in learning to be more and more comfortable with the uncomfortability. And as far as I know, deep transformation is, there's no constant gentle slope through that dark night. So if anything that promises that is usually some sort of false advertising.
Yeah, just one really quick point on that also. Your resistances, everyone's particular resistances, I really feel ultimately they are keys as well. So to be really curious and interested in your own particular resistances, what are your own kind of blockages that are coming up, and working with them and inquiring into them. It's like a doorway into recovering what your essential self is really longing for. So also just be really curious and friendly with your own particular resistance.
And just to touch off on something Araminta was saying, the idea of that there are things always dying, and with resistance there's typically there's something dying and there's something trying to be born, and there tends to be resistance to both of those things. And discerning what is it that's trying to die and what is it that's trying to be born can be really helpful with regard to easing the process. And then the other thing is that the idea that ultimately the personal ego project is a losing game, and recognizing that, you know, that trying to balance being your best self and awakening and being amazing and all these things, that somehow paradoxically coexists with recognizing that life is a tragedy, and that our ego selves are ultimately up against a situation that we're not going to win, and that we have to surrender to something higher. So that it's very much a confusing thing in that way, obviously, on a mental level, to recognize what's resistance to something higher, what's resistance to something in my personal self, what's resistance to something lower, etc.
Yes. Yeah, we'll take more questions. I think we'll go with Kayla and then Bruce.
My question for the panel is one having to do with balance. In the spiritual growth and healing movement that we see, there's often this paradox of seeing the bliss seeking, only chasing the joy and the divine love and the divine light. And on the other side of that, I have a little bit of a fear of the shadow work because of witnessing and experiencing, diving so deep into the healing process, getting caught in the loop of healing, and I'm healing me, and I'm healing me, and it's all about my trauma and my wounding, and then not being productive and taking right action. So my question is, where is this balance between allowing ourselves to experience light and joy, like it's okay to enjoy, diving into the deep work, but also being very active and productive in the outside world?
I love your question. I don't know if I have a simple answer for it, but I mean, I definitely feel, where I live in Guatemala is kind of a new age bubble scene, and I see the bliss junkies and self-development's become fashionable, and I'm a bit concerned as well that there's an addiction to peak experiences, and kind of in awe of the younger generation and their intensity and their ability to seemingly go from one ceremony to the next, and deeply concerned that they're not allowing the integration process, and feeling the responsibility for all of us that do some sort of transformational work to encourage and support the integration process. And the time of not doing, as unsexy as that can be, or as unproductive as that may feel, but that the stillness and the silence is vital. Having said that, what I also heard is you describe as this place where we potentially can become so fixated on our own journey that we then don't end up sharing our gifts or cross-pollinating and kind of breaking out of a sort of, can get quite self-obsessive, where am I, what am I feeling today, and myopic viewpoint, and actually not being in touch with the immensity of what's actually happening on this planet right now. So I think you're in a beautiful inquiry around harmonizing. I think balance is a tricky word, because in order to get balance, everything needs to be at kind of similar levels, and my sense is that what happens is it waves, and at times we're doing our deep introspective work, and then at other times we hit chapters in our life where we are more externally focused, and life force is, gifting us transmissions to share and networking and getting fed from the outside. So to look at where we may be getting overly identified with any kind of particular quadrant of the spectrum, and maybe where we're getting overly comfortable or overly identified in that one, and making sure that we're having the flexibility. But it's a tricky one.
Also, it's a beautiful question to walk with through life. It's a question that your subconscious will give you answers and answers and answers, and then eventually you'll come to the point for a while, oh, this answer I like. So there might be some smart answers here, but you going with this question will guide you most efficiently, I think.
I want to speak very briefly into the shadow and light theme that you brought up, because it's very dear to me. And we have the word health, healing, which interestingly enough, if you take the root of that word, you will come to the same root as the word whole. So health and whole are actually synonyms in a sort of a weird way. And what is clear to me is that health or wholeness is not about cutting any part out, be it the light or be it the shadow. But then if we want to include all of that, then it really becomes a paradoxical attempt. And I want to give some credit to paradoxes, because isn't there where we have the most passionate genius of humans in attempting to be so big that we can contain all of it, light and shadow, dynamically as time passes. So I celebrate the paradox of your question. I love it.
And just one little thing, I mean, generally speaking, integral theory addresses that question in a real beautiful way. I think just the idea that there's all these different levels, and that we can be, fighting a battle on one level and accepting that battle on another, and accepting the loss of that battle on another level, retreating into ourselves in some part of our consciousness and going out into the world into another, like you say, paradoxically, all at the same time.
I have another one, so you're getting good answers for your, there's a nice English term for it. I don't have it on me. Okay, so something that's, for example, in the integral theory, really interesting is you have the theory, and then there is the background which doesn't get attention because the white of the paper or the space behind or within the structure, there's not really a way to like put it into a system, and that's where the intelligence comes from, in my experience. So yeah, that's just consciousness is with us.
Nice. Okay, yeah, we'll go with Bruce.
So my question is more about the resistance in our collective. And so what came up for me is this thing of how wild am I allowed to be? So before I get carted off to a psychotic ward or exiled from community, this thing that Terry was talking about of denial, connective denial, and even the way that we address these issues of talking with our heads and people on TVs and summits all over the world, and yet my passionate body underneath on top of my peace wants to be fucking crazy, wants to express how I feel about this planet, not in a fucking reasonable way. So I want to know, my question is, how wild are we allowed to be? And isn't part of our healing got to do with not being reasonable?
Well, why don't we all stand up for that? So this question, I guess, is a matter of circumstance, and I love the exercise Araminta did earlier, and in this kind of setting, there's the tendency by the structure to be in our heads, and our physical body, our emotional body, like, okay, I'm going to sit through this and I get some nice information, and then I'm going to do something with it in my life. So maybe we use this next exercise to just let this alive side, this wild side, show for a few, let's say 30 seconds. Is that good with everybody? If that's good with you, raise your hand. Cool. If that's not good with you, you can hide between all the crazy people. Yeah, and what I would invite you to, like, do we have like a nice sound to start with? That's a paradoxical sound to start with. Yeah, let's all just move our body and scream and express. Maybe it's anger, maybe it's sadness. Right? 3, 2, 1, go. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Cool. So we had nobody running around naked, no furniture destroyed, so I guess that's how far we can get in 30 seconds.
Thank you for that. That was amazing. And thank you for your question. And one last thing I want to contribute to that, because your question brought about the theme of wildness, and to me it also brought about the theme of the individual and the collective. And on that note, a whole other theme opens that has to do with individual healing and expression and collective healing and expression, or with sovereignty and synergy, or with me and us. What is the answer to that? There is no answer, but I do have something very alive in me, and I don't know how many of you share it, which is that I feel that more and more and more in all fields of existence, we are going towards us, towards collective, towards group healing, towards group recognition, towards group love, perhaps. I want to take it too far because, you know, it could go into group sex. Oh my God, I said it. Shit. Anyway, so just letting that question brew. Me and us, what's happening on that level?
I have a slightly less sexy contribution on this topic. And yeah, that I think it's a very tricky balance between, on the one hand, being fucking wild and allowing ourselves to expand and to celebrate and to be angry and living that, and in being so free, hopefully inspiring others and empowering others and allowing them to also step into that and creating that aliveness. And at the same time, it's a delicate dance between not alienating people, and it's all about the container and the framing. And I think in all of these different new movements that we see, I mean, it happened to yoga and meditation and mindfulness, and with this effort to make it more accessible and appealing to the mainstream, a lot of the essence can be diluted. And at the same time, yeah, like how do you create a movement? How do you bring that in? I know many people in my life who would have been totally freaked out by what just happened, who would have not thought it's like, woo, great. So I think we all have to continuously inquire and experiment how to bring that wildness in a way that, yeah, I don't know, that can inspire others to, and also ignite the fire of their wildness and not just make them shut the door. That's, yeah, I don't have the answer to it, but I just thought I'd drop that in also.
And just on, basically on the same note, I share the same frustration, and you know, doing the work I do every day, I'm thankful that there's this container that is my practice, where I get to go into wild states and you know, hold insanity and hold rage and terror, and that's great, but it's basically just at the office. And then, you know, I leave the office, and in my personal life, when that tends to come out, there's been a lot of negative aspects of that. And it's been really frustrating to have to try to turn it off when I leave the office, and have people misunderstand, you know, certain the embodiment of certain things. And it you know, it doesn't go over well when, you know, to go into the embodiment of rage and then to tell your girlfriend, this is really your rage that I'm feeling right now. You know, it often is not very accepted, you know, or this is our rage, and, you know, or it's just there's not much of a place for it. And so it's almost, I've found that over time it's like it's getting harder and harder, because as my consciousness expands and I can sort of accept certain feelings, then I know that more and more I have to create this kind of sealed off container so that I can stay in the smaller box when I'm not working.
Some people have it the opposite way around, Lance. It's like we have to turn it off in the office. So I just want to, we've got some more topics, and Araminta, you wanted to share on?
Well, I just want to say yes to Bruce's question. I think wildness is probably the most significant fire that needs to be ignited in all of us, because underneath the terror that's at the core, our fear of the vibrancy of the life force and the unpredictability of the entire life experience, and all of our attempts at civilization that creates these chapters of stability in our evolution. And yet we're kind of aware, I think, no matter how much we may be trying to avoid looking at it head on, that our civilization has concreted over so much wildness to a point now that we're suffocating ourselves. And that suffocation we're experiencing on every level, both externally and internally. And it's until we create some space for this wildness to re-emerge on every level that's going to give us the energy to support all the momentum that we need in order to avoid full suffocation. So our relationship to wildness is fundamental, and it's terrifying. So how do we support each of us to get better at being loving while we're terrified? But usually terror and wildness have a certain, slightly similar excitement, fear, you know, like turn your terror around and let it loose when you have deep, deep trust at the same time for life. And then I think there's a way forward.
Also something that I've observed in the last years is that love made it into the advertisement community. So you love your bike, you love your car, you love your everything. And this kind of makes it more acceptable in a way to talk about it. And with hundreds of millions going into advertisement for love, maybe this will become true for wildness in the coming years. And yeah, one thing is that who shapes our mindset, and in the last, look, I don't know, 50, 100 years, it was corporations. So one way could be to bring these topics into corporations, and this is what I see happening here with many of the change agents.
We could be more wild, I think. I think we're gonna have to have like a wild open mic, wild night, do whatever you want. Purpose Summit 2019. Okay, so we've got two more. We've got Yazi and then Lady in the Black, and then we'll see how much time we have left, because I want to leave a few minutes to just drop in final thoughts.
Okay, first of all, I just want to say with the word healing, there's this beautiful sister mentor called Linda Starwolf, and she's like, healing, I mean, we're healed. Aren't we healed already? Is it not transformation that's happening right now? I mean, healing just somehow says that there's something wrong and something sick, whereas in our human nature, we're actually healed. It's the transformation that's happening. So I just wanted to put a note on that. And secondly, with all that fire and passion and life purpose, and it's all happening, and the wildness is out, and things are rolling, and then we have a human body. And I find that sometimes in my own journey, it's like fire, passion, spirit, fuck yes, purpose is happening, things are manifesting, and then I need to eat something, or I need to drink a cup of water, and I'm like, oh God. And then actually my body needs to rest, but I'm on fire because something's about to happen. And then I'm like, okay, God, I need to rest now, I need to go to sleep. Or so much is starting to move, but my body, there's a body. And I'm noticing more that the times where I was into my daily practice, I got bored of being in my practice because fire was happening. But at the same time, that almost like, how do we bring that fire, that passion, that purpose? And then we have a body that needs to eat, needs to rest. And then there's discipline or discipline and daily practice. So what's your view on that? Like, is there a daily practice? How do we nourish ourselves in that fire and not get burnt out?
Yeah, it's another paradox of bringing polarities together, the infinite spirit and the finite body, physical body, that has about 80 years on this planet and wants to sleep at 1/3 of the time and eat 1 hour a day, whatever. So yeah, living in this kind of paradox is part of the teaching, I think, that we're here to learn, being patient.
As far as the conundrum of the use of the word healing, it's definitely a big topic, it seems. I love what Linda and what you shared about, is it time to let go of a kind of a victim identity en masse and honor all the challenges that we've been through and all the ways that we maybe haven't been awesome and loving to each other across time and history. and yet honor that even in all of the seemingly fucked upness, we have been evolving and learning. And so maybe it's not so much healing, but continual growth and expansion and transformation. And where, not that it's just the trick of using pretty words, but where can we actually shift a sense of self and the story of self that actually is more genuine, of the immense beauty of the human journey, actually. That's actually a bit more honoring of the capacity that's within us, and stop seeing us as so weak and pathetic often is the storyline. That can keep us trapped in a loop with a never-ending healing journey, because underneath that there's often a story that we are unlovable. And one day I'll take the right workshop, or I'll go on that diet, or whatever I'll master that yoga pose, and then I'll be lovable. And it's kind of like, as a collective, we seem to be caught in that story. One day humans will maybe evolve and be worthy of love. Divine grace somehow put back in the garden. And something inherent in that storyline needs to be shifted, in my opinion, and that's something that we each need to do.
Yeah, just wanted to say one quick thing on the point of the body, which is very live for me right now, because I got ill after a week of full-on purpose, and my body's starting to shout out like, hey, let me catch up. And I really think, in the same way as we're talking about, integrating the shadow and feeling the full spectrum of our emotions, I really think that we need to not see of it as a polarity of like, oh, I really want to manifest my purpose, but oh man, I have a body and I need to eat. It's, to me, the body holds the truth of our being. Like the body never lies, and there's some sense in me that I have that a wanting to manifest a purpose that doesn't take into account the truth of what our vehicle is saying doesn't feel like it has full force. Like I feel like there needs to be an integration of both the spirit, like what you were saying, and the matter as well. And I think that's a very important collective thing. I think that nature is saying the same thing with all the pushing, hurting. Our bodies are such important guides, and I think neglecting what the body is saying for the sake of manifesting our purpose, something doesn't feel right for me in that.
Thank you for the question. Okay, and we'll take one final question on the topic for the moment.
Hi. I'm curious what will come out of me right now. Keeps changing. I'm sitting here with this healing theme also, and I think I've been stretching myself throughout the time that I've been on this process and path of healing, whatever that is, between going right in and hovering above, like all these teachings of all the old masters and the tradition that Muji is on, and sitting there in his satsang, and then also the medicines that are super popular right now. And what I came across lately, and I wanted not that it is like that, but it's just coming up and up again, it's that all seems to be related to family. And I'm really curious what you think about this theme, that, all the native traditions, that all the ceremonies that are really about just healing the family, and that everything related, all the sisterhood theme and brotherhood and mother and father, and also the sexual practices that we're diving into more and more, and Berlin is full of that. It's all all I'm encountering is just my relationship to my sister and to my mother and to my father. And I'm kind of so tired of this. I want to be free of that. And is that possible? Yeah.
One way, my answer to that is no. It's not possible to be free of the bonds with, be it biological family or human family, because human beings, we are not made to be alone. And therefore, I totally relate to that frustration, because it's alive in me as well sometimes. Can you just all leave me alone for a couple of years? But it just doesn't work. Because the reflection in your eyes as I'm speaking is what makes me alive. Because me alone on a planet shooting in outer space is just a concoction of the mind. So my answer to you is no, and maybe you'll just what I feel is maybe you'll deal with different families, like biological family, soul family, purpose family, human family, but always family, always tribe, always group.
Yeah, like the quote of one American professor, and he said, humans can't really think themselves. We always need to speak, and then the other person kind of says, oh, this was smart, and this was not so smart. And the same vice versa. So actually, we need this exchange to come up with great ideas, with mutual support. Just thinking in ourselves, there's this space, this circular space that doesn't bring a lot forth. So yeah, it goes along on that line. He's a neuroscientist, and he was like really discovering that neurologically we need the exchange.
It was not about alone versus together. It was more about everything related to root family that I'm a little bit, yeah, oh, really?
The biological family.
I guess the way I'd speak to that is the idea of, again, these different levels and how on certain levels we'll never be separate from family or separate from the earth or from each other, but that we experience individuality to various extents and in various contexts. And so different kinds of consciousness work and healing work are about, to a certain extent, developing out of certain contexts, meaning the entanglement and identification of selfhood in a certain context, and developing up into, say, one that's less entangled with your family emotionally, for example. But it doesn't mean you're not still merged with your family emotionally on a certain level. It's just that an aspect of your consciousness can transcend that and individuate out of that and be capable of discerning a certain type of separateness from that. And so with that would come a certain autonomy and freedom. But again, it's a paradox that they're both really occurring. There's no escaping it. And at the same time, we have these aspects of our consciousness that are capable of getting some sense of privacy and boundary and freedom.
Thank you for that question. I really contemplate that myself. Thank you. Okay. Let's just take a moment to drop in, and you can just share a few seconds to close us out here. Who'd ever like to begin?
Yeah, thank you for listening. Thank you for giving your presence to this conversation. And I always have these environments as an opportunity for consciousness practice. Like when only my mind is addressed, then if I allow my mind to be as quiet, as silent as possible, and this is what's kind of easy here on stage, and for me not always that easy sitting in the auditorium, is to drop in this state of consciousness, this field of awareness. So thanks for sharing that with me and us.
Yeah, thank you. Really rich discussion. Yeah, I guess as a final closing thought, I think when I was contemplating the title of the panel and the idea behind it, what came up for me immediately was this sense of how can you really know what your purpose is if you don't know who you are? And of course, none of us really know who we are. But I think, to me anyway, it's on the path to that discovery of and freeing ourselves, and breaking through a lot of the conditioned ideas and concepts and beliefs and patterns that we've accumulated, inherited. And through all of these practices, whether it's plant medicines, body work, psychotherapy, sexuality, it's through these practices and on that path to discovery of who we are on a deeper level that also, I think, purpose can a sense of our purpose and what we are uniquely here to bring can manifest, and equally through these practices that we can start to develop and encounter our power to then manifest that. So, yeah.
Well, what's alive for me is that yes, we are whole, we are perfect as we are, and at the same time we deeply need each other for life, for well-being, for health, whatever your concept of health is, and for purpose. So my invitation is to tune also perhaps into collective purpose. What is the collective purpose of this particular tribe and of the tribe that surrounds us? Because we can't do it alone. And even if we could, why would we, really?
I guess just the one more thing I'd like to say is just some of the fundamental, I guess the best word I can think of at the moment is paradigms that our society is still structured by, even though it's surprising because they aren't new paradigms, but for example, just to name three, the idea that consciousness is primary, not thought. The idea that the imaginal realm is real, it's not imaginary, it's a real realm, and the idea that you have to embrace both light and dark to experience wholeness. Our society doesn't live by these things, and that's a huge problem, obviously. So I would use the word healing kind of with regard to that. I would like to see some healing with regard to coming back to those, I like the idea of truths rather than paradigms, that those are truths that some of our paradigms are in the way of. And then just lastly, being here at this summit, and sort of being up here on stage right now, preaching to the choir, I feel that. I feel the energy and the consciousness that those truths are very present here, and it's just wonderful to be a part of.
Yeah, I just feel like it's such an exciting time to be alive, and the cross-pollination and the new ideas and the new understandings that are coming through. It's just epic, and so I feel like if you consider yourself on some kind of healing journey, whatever salsa dance, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, whatever you're doing, if it's not fundamentally a path, or you look back at where you were and what you were thinking and how you were experiencing yourself a year ago in kind of awe at how wild the journey is, then maybe you're taking it a little too seriously and seeing it as this heavy thing. And I think the invitation is to recognize that they're very connected, this journey of discovery, and to dive on in, because it's wildly beautiful at the moment on this planet in all of the challenges we face. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you so much, panelists. Thank you.